Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Pace Edwards UltraGroove electric tonneau cover on a 2024 Ford F-450. Adding a tonneau cover does a lot for a truck. A lot of times this open bed area is great to put stuff in, but if it's raining or if it's going to be having any kind of inclement weather out there, you do have to worry about the cargo that's in the back. So this one, really nice. You're going to be able to open and close it from a push of one of two key fobs that are included, which really makes it easy. I mean, it's seamless to be able to just push this button and it's going to open and close for you. But also protecting your things, it's going to become something that's a little bit more of security function as well, because with this closed and a tailgate that locks, you have a whole compartment that you're going to be able to keep things safely stored. Now this tonneau cover is one of the more premium ones out there on the market entirely, but there's also quite a few cool features that make this stand out over your traditional tonneau cover. Now, something that tonneau covers generally cause issue with is being able to put other accessories on while you have a tonneau cover, and that's not the case here. This has T-slots, so if you ever put a ladder rack or even a cargo rack on the back of here, you can utilize those T-slots to be able to mount that up. That's not something you typically find on a lot of tonneau covers. Something else is this all retracts into a canister, and the canister is raised up. So even if you need to put some 2x4s or something low, you still have a decent amount of clearance here, and it's angled, so it really doesn't take a ton of space away. And this is where it all rolls up as it stores. So the cool thing about that is other tonneau covers, you may have to tri-fold them back or whatever it may be, and a lot of times they're going to stow upwards, blocking your camera or your rear view visibility. That's not the case here. This entire tonneau cover is really flush. It does not stick up that much, and it really gives it a clean look overall. So whether it's open, closed, whatever it may be, it does take up this spot, but in the grand scheme of things, especially on a long bed truck like this, I think it's totally worth it. With a lot of tonneau covers too, people are wondering if it's waterproof, and that's kind of a rough word to answer because depending on the weather, sometimes you'll get a little bit moisture in with some of the tonneau covers, but I think Pace Edwards has done a really, really good job of trying to make sure that this is going to be as watertight as possible. So you have foam that goes on the backside that's going to compress down as you tighten, but there's also going to be 4 different drain holes for all the water to channel out of. So underneath the canister, if there's ever water built in, there's drains that run in between the cab and the bed, and it actually comes with factory style knockout plates. So that's something that's unique about this too. Not that many tonneau covers require drilling, but this one is 0 drilling required. I was able to utilize all the factory spots for it to all work, including the drains that are on the backside as well. Those are going to capture water that are trapped in these rails and then drain it out straight to the ground, so it's not going to build up, keeping this water resistant, but also it's going to keep it nice and smooth and not build up any corrosion long term. And this is aluminum, so it's, I would say, lightweight, but really being a powered tonneau cover, you probably don't care that much about the weight. But aluminum is going to hold up to corrosion, rust, any of that long term. So this is one that you put in place, and with the black powder coat finish, it should stay looking good for the lifespan of the truck. Controlling the tonneau cover is super easy. I mentioned they come with 2 key fobs, so that's nice. So you can have one in the truck and maybe one on a key ring. Open, close, pretty simple. You can pause it at any time while it's retracting or extending by just pushing the button again. And it's very quick to do it, which is nice. Now, if you're worried if you lose the fobs or your batteries are dead, and how do you operate it? There's actually 2 different ways that you can do that. There's a manual release that's located on this here. So if you pull that, you're able to draw this out. It's just going to unlock it from the grooves of the motor. Other option is you can actually add a Bluetooth component to it, and that way you can operate it from your phone. Now, not included with the tonneau cover, but something you could add on later. But I think having 2 key fobs should make it to where you shouldn't have to worry too much about getting locked out. You'll still be able to use this whenever you need to. Something else that I'll point out is the ability to pause this. So if you just push the button again during its process, it'll pause it at any second. It's very quick to respond. So that makes it nice too. If you want to just close it up to protect something up front, but you have something popping out in the back, no worries. You can just simply push the button whenever you want it to pause. So at the end of the day, this tonneau cover is obviously one that's going to have a little bit more of a price tag and also features over your just standard tonneau cover. But if you have a truck that is really something you're going to keep forever and you want the ability to just open and close at the push of a button, this is a really good option. our F-450 today is decked out, and this goes along right with it. So is it necessary to have a powered tonneau cover? No, but is it cool? It's pretty awesome, yeah. So again, this is something, if you're really looking for buy once, cry once, and you want all the bells and whistles, this is definitely the tonneau cover I'd go with. And partially because it looks fantastic. It really is just a really clean look overall, and the quality throughout the entire kit is definitely present. So even though it is a little bit more of a premium tonneau cover, I think the thought and R&D that went into it is fantastic, and I think you'd be really happy with it. So as far as installation, I mentioned it's no drill. It's pretty easy. You may need an extra set of hands to get the canister in place, but the rest of it really just kind of goes along with some brackets, and it's pretty easy to do. They give you an alignment tool to make sure that everything's dialed in perfectly so it operates smoothly. The instructions are not that great. They are laid out okay, but a little bit confusing at times. So I'll walk you through the installation on the one we did here, and that way you can get your tonneau cover installed. To begin your installation, the best thing you're going to want to do is first lay all of the components out. Now there should be two separate boxes that you're going to be unpacking. There's going to be a long box that has our side rails, and so I got those set up. We have our canister and also our top plate. Now in the box with the canister, you're going to have your clamps, you're going to have a lot of different accessories for the drains, as well as a gauge to get everything put together. They got some really high quality wipes from 303. We have our bracketry, our foam, and our drain tube. One other part that we're going to be doing is the wiring harness, and that's going to be our first step, is getting it ran from the back of the bed where we're going to plug it in eventually up to the battery. Our wiring harness, as I mentioned, super high quality, nice and braided, it's, really great, plenty of length here to be able to run to our battery. We have a quad cab here. I'm not worried at all that we're not going to have enough to be able to run to that battery. And our plug that's going to go into our canister eventually is going to be this side. And as we run this down, we want to make sure that we leave about a foot of extra length to be able to plug that in and not have it too tight. And so that leaves us with running this portion to our battery. And we have our red wire that's going to go to the positive, and our black wire is going to go to the negative. There's also an inline fuse holder that's already in place, so that's really nice, and it comes with the fuse. So in order to get this passed down, what we're going to do is go to our stake pocket cover. We're going to get that popped out. To get this popped out, I recommend using a plastic trim panel tool so you don't mar up the plastic. If you have an old credit card or gift card, that'll also work. But as you pry that open, you should be able to pull that, and this will pop out. So the tab's a little bit longer on the rear side. So if you get this front side popped out, we'll just leave this here for now. And then we'll take that end with the fuse holder, and we're going to pass this through our stake pocket. So just make sure that you're getting it through the channel, and this will run all the way down. So you can keep feeding that until we have about a foot of extra wiring. Now, as far as getting the wiring down, it's not a super clean shot all the way down, but you should be able to get it to where you can grab a portion of it, pull that slack down, and at this point we should be left with this plug. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this through the small opening right underneath our stake pocket. And to make sure that we keep that 1 foot, what I'll do is grab one of the included zip ties, and I'm just going to zip tie up our wire to our tie down point here. And that'll be ready for when we plug it in later. I'm going to put my stake pocket cover back in place. So with the rest of our wiring and the included zip ties, I'm going to run this along the frame rail, making sure that it's not going to make contact with anything hot or moving. We have powered running boards here. We want to make sure they're not going to be in the way. So a lot of times if you use a factory wire loom, it's a good spot to get that all zip tied up. And then as we get closer to the engine bay, you may want to use a pull wire or something to fish down there to tape this up and get it close to the battery. So I'll get mine all ran and show you how it looks. Using the factory wire loom that's alongside the frame rail was a really great spot to zip tie it up. I did contour along with it. Main thing is keeping it snug to where it's not going to become loose and catch anything as you're going down the road long term. So make your way up towards the wheel well, and from here it's really easy to route it up into the engine bay. To get the wire pulled up, I wanted to keep it away from any of the steering or the engine. That way it's not going to get damaged. I use an airline tube, but really if you have anything that you can feed down there, you can tape up the rest of your harness, pull it up, and get a nice clean path. Now I had excess wire, or at least enough to be able to run over to the battery on our passenger side. So what I did is I pulled back this firewall insulation and ran our cable underneath here, and that's going to keep it nice and protected. And then we made our way over to our passenger battery. Using this battery, I think is a better option just because we have spots to be able to attach this onto our terminals. So as I loop this over, it's a perfect amount of wiring. And being that this is a quad cab, as long as you don't get too frivolous with how you route the wires, you'll still have plenty of extra here. Now, we can attach this up to our battery, but I would recommend, or highly suggest, taking out that fuse. You want to make sure that we don't have power going through it. We'll put this in a little bit later, but I just ran the red to our positive terminal and then the black to our negative terminal. I'll come back a little bit later and get some wire loom on here just to kind of clean it up, but for now, we have it all hooked up. At this point, you're probably going to want an extra set of hands. We're going to get our canister put in place in the bed, and we're going to be centering it up. So you can use the box that this came with. I'm using 2 5-gallon buckets, and it's going to elevate it a little bit, and that's totally fine, but we want to center it up in the bed as much as possible. So from shipping, they do have plywood attached to our canister, which is really nice. It keeps it from getting damaged. So we are going to get that removed. Just a 3/8 socket should be able to take these out, and just be careful that it doesn't completely drop down. We don't want to make sure, well, we want to make sure it doesn't get damaged in the process. So as we put this in place, we're going to get it into the bed and on top of those buckets. We want to make sure that the harness is going to be on that driver's side. So just make sure you have it in the proper orientation. And with the buckets just kind of spread out evenly, this will create the nice platform to hold this up. So we'll just drop it on there nice and even. And again, try to get it as centered up as possible. So I have about 1 inch on this side. It's a little bit tighter on that side, so I'll slide it over. And just make sure it's nice and solid sitting here, and then we can move along. We're going to be attaching our side rails onto the canister, and that's going to kind of begin the process of getting it all put together. So I would grab both your rails, lay them out on the bedside. You'll find that it's going to contour towards the edge by the tailgate, so make sure that you have it facing obviously the right way. So the outside channeling should be facing towards the outside. And on each of the rails, if you flip it over, there's going to be this paper on the foam. This is just for shipping purposes, so you can take this off. And then we can flip this over, but as I do that, something I'll point out, up here we have a threaded hole. This is going to be important later on because as we slide this in and lock it in, we're going to be looking for this to align with the hole on the canister. So just keep that in mind, that way you know where it's at roughly. And with your canister, there's going to be packaging that's kind of tucked in there. We can get this pulled out. So should be a little bit of foam here. We can also take off the bubble wrap portion right here, and this is going to be our key fob. And for this upcoming step, we're going to want the alignment tool that's included. This is going to be usable in a few different spots just to make sure everything's properly adjusted. We're also going to grab our Phillips head screw, a flat washer, and a split washer. Now we can manually unravel a little bit of our canister, and our stop is going to be this plastic spacer here where we have a Phillips head screw. So we want to pull this out, and we're going to just set this. You'll see on the bottom side there's this kind of ridge here, and that's going to be the stop. So that way it never draws in further than that. So we're going to pull it out enough to where it can rest on that stop. We'll be sliding these into the canister, and you'll see the channeling that we have here. We have the 2 notches, and that's going to slide into this portion. Now it's slightly notched out here so you can rotate it lightly because this gap between our sweep that we have here, this is where the canister, the tonneau cover portion is going to slide in. So as we're notching it in the groove here, it's going to be sliding over this canister. Now you can slide it back, but what we're going to be looking for is getting that threaded portion aligned with the hole. So that's kind of what we're looking for when we get it all the way back. It does help to have an extra person on the back end, keeping it nice and level to slide it in. The alignment tool, they have you putting it here, and I believe that just to kind of keep the tonneau cover portion at a level where it should guide it in. I don't think it's completely necessary, and it might actually be a little bit more cumbersome having it in there. So what I'm going to do is just kind of feed this in take my time watching my grooves and just making sure everything's all channeled together. So I'll look for that bottom groove first. And if I can get that to kind of slide in those notches, or in the right ballpark at least. And then as I continue to slide this in, we should be able to get our tonneau cover portion through that groove as well. So it is a little bit tricky here. That notch section also allows you to get the outside groove into there while you're getting the tonneau cover in, and then as you slide it, that closing or that opening or that notched out portion on the groove will allow you to get this all snapped in. So here I have it attached. Now obviously we have our canister a little bit higher than the bed rails, so it is going to tilt a little bit here, but it is attached. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and get that hardware attached on the bottom side once you get your other rail in place as well. Hardware combo, we'll have our screw, a split washer, and a flat washer. So now I'll just move this forward until we get that threaded portion right in line. I'll thread this by hand first. And you may need to slide it back and forth a little bit to get it perfectly aligned, but we should be able to get it started here. A little bump forward, I got the thread started. So with the Phillips head screwdriver, I'm just going to snug that down, and we'll get our other side in place as well. With your screws tightened down, you can now grab the caps, and these are going to go on the outside of the extrusion. So we'll just slide these into the grooves. And it should just pop in. May have to give it just a little smack there, but we'll put those on both sides. Our next step is going to eventually get us to have foam on the front side, and that way when this canister is in place, that foam is going to create a seal and really make sure that this is going to be as watertight as possible. So important step here, and what we're going to do to accomplish that and get it all dialed in perfectly is we'll get our buckets taken out, we're going to drop down our canister and close the tailgate, and with our alignment tool that should tell us exactly where it needs to be. So you may need some assistance to be able to lift this up and get your buckets out, but it should drop in place pretty easily. Now this step may be a little bit tedious, but it's going to really make sure that we're going to get the best fitment possible, and that's going to really cut down on any potential leaks. So what we'll do is we'll close up our tailgate, and we're going to be using our alignment tool, and you'll find the hole and this little portion here. And what we're going to do is rest the flat part against the tailgate, and we should be able to slide this into the gap that's on the bottom side. So it may be hard to see here, but this little inset is where we're going to try to place this, and we'll adjust accordingly front or back to get this to where it's just about perfect with that gap in between, and that's going to make sure that this flap is going to seal up when we close our tailgate. So I'll get my gauge in place, check both sides, and then adjust accordingly. The best way I found is hold this pretty well flush with your tailgate opening and find that notch. So I'll get mine to seat in. It's right about there. Hold it up, and you're going to see if you have a gap or not. So mine's about, I don't know, maybe a millimeter or two. I am going to adjust that out and then just make sure that the other side is looking equal. Something else to take in consideration too is making sure that the rails are pretty well straight. It's going to be hard to really see, but kind of get an eye line down there and make sure that it's sitting properly, because that can adjust that distance slightly. Now since we got our tailgate gap adjusted, this is roughly where everything's going to sit, but we need to put foam on this front side. We'll have a top plate that goes on here, and it's going to sandwich this foam down, and this is going to create that seal, make sure water's not trickling in here. So what you're going to want to do, as a good visual reference, grab some masking tape or painter's tape, put it on the outside edge of where those caps are, and that line on the towards the back of the truck is going to be where we lay that foam, because we are going to have to move this canister a little bit forward to make sure that we get the foam underneath here. So this is making sure that, all those adjustments, everything's going to go back nice and clean. And we will probably need to trim a little bit, so have a pair of scissors ready. But I'll scoot this back and show you exactly how to put this on. So make sure that everything's nice and clean, but just follow that line. And we're going to go from the outside of the rail. So I'll just place this end. And then just press in as you work your way over, following that tape line until we have that whole length covered. And we will have some excess more than likely, so we'll be trimming it. So just get this as straight as possible. And then with that in place, I'm going to just cut it right at the edge. And then with that all in place, we'll take our painter's tape off, and then we can lift our canister back on, making sure that we're pressing it flat on. Don't drag it over, but lift this up, and these, where we put our caps in place, those should rest on that foam. We can grab our top plate, and this is just gonna go right on top here. And those holes should align with, there's gonna be these threaded portions right here, and this is movable, so what I'd recommend doing is aligning it with your eyes so you can get a straight shot, and maybe just hand thread a little bit through there and get that started. Now once you get that threaded in, you'll see that it is, because it's slotted, it's going to move a little bit. So push this back up towards that cap, and then with a Phillips head screwdriver, we'll just snug this down. Now with that resting on the foam, it's a good time to double check that the gap didn't move, once you set it back on, and that way everything's gonna be nice and squared up. Once we have that done, we're gonna start getting our clamps in place. Now we need to grab our clamp extensions, and there's 4 of them, and they're gonna be stickered as to where they go. So I've laid these out, so we have back right, back left, front right. So to make this easier and show you guys how this all goes on, there's going to be grooves that are just kind of like the front channeling that we put in place, but there's notches that are cut out, and that's going to allow us to get this in place, snap it in, and then slide it back. The shims are going to be going on this outside portion, so you may need to move the rail a little bit out to get that clearance, but we should be able to get this slid in with no problem. So if you follow the channeling, there's going to be a section that's just about the same width as our extension clamp. So put it on this bottom one here, and we want that to bite into it. And then from here, we should be able to raise this up to where it's flush, and then slide this back. It should be in that channeling. So it should be able to slide like that, and then you can push your rail back to get a little bit more tension. I'm going to get all of these in place, and then we'll come back and tighten them up. Now, if you're having trouble getting this slot to drop into place, it's very possible that the set screw is out a little bit too far. So a 5/32 Allen key is going to draw that back, and it should make it a lot easier to get in place. And what we're going to be looking for is where that notch ends. That's where we're going to put our clamp, and then we'll take that same 5/32 Allen key, and we're going to tighten these down. Now the same goes for the front as well. Those are going to go towards the front of that groove, and then we'll just repeat on the other side, getting these all tightened. These clamps are all side specific because it's going to allow us to put these clamps in place and eventually get our hardware to get our rails to tighten down. So grab the brackets that look like this with the elongated hole, and this is going to slide in with this kind of open portion of this circle facing towards the exterior. So this will just slide into place right here. And I'm going to get the remaining 3 in place as well. Now we'll grab this portion of the bracket, and this is going to go up and clamp around our bedside to make sure that it's a nice tight fit. Now make sure that this circle portion does slide over our bracket that we put into place, and you may need to slide this out a little bit to get it started, but just make sure that it is going to be in there. And it's still pretty tight to get this all back in place, so you may have to play with it a little bit. So let's see if I can't slide this in. There we go. And then our hardware, we're going to have these tightening knobs. I'm going to put a split washer and a flat washer on, and then we have a barrel nut that's going to go on the back side. So we'll thread it through these holes and just get it started to that barrel nut. It'll kind of rest in the groove there. And just make it lightly in place here. We'll come back and make sure that all of our measurements are good. I'll get the rest of our brackets and handles put in place. So now we can go through and tighten down our handles. I'm going to start at the canister side and work our way back because it's a little bit more flexible on the tail end. So getting this in place, you can use our alignment tool. It's going to be this section, And you're just going to slide this up and make sure that the rail is, kind of seated properly. You don't want to over tighten. If it's too tight for this, that's not really what we're looking for. So as I slide this in, you should have this backing plate pretty much aligning with that rail, just perfect with it. So I'll make sure I'll tighten this down a little bit more. We still have that just enough play, and the handle's tight. So I'll go through and do the same thing for the remaining of the handles. Now, something you're going to want to check, most times you're okay to not have to worry about the extra shims, but if the backside of these brackets, which had this material attached to it, still has a gap, you want to make sure that that's going to be nice and tight. So here I have a shim. I can not get this behind there, so I'm good to go. If there is a gap, then you're going to want to put those shims in and then tighten down accordingly, and that way it's going to have full contact. Now we have these brackets, and these are going to be kickstands, as they call it. This is going to make sure that it's not going to push too far out and stretch that our canister or our tonneau cover as we go. So this will slide on the back end here. So there's a plastic portion that has our channeled slots. We're going to be sliding this in here. Now it is a little bit difficult here. It's tight, but we should be able to get this on. We're going to slide this back just into the corrugation here on the bed. And if you need to, you can loosen up this back end. It's not ideal here, but this is just kind of going step by step. So if you're watching this before you install it, you might want to slide these in and make your life a little bit easier. We're catching on our rubber a little bit. There we are. So we're looking to have it in a position right about here where it's going to be nice and flat. And what we'll be doing is putting our kickstand in place. And this is, again, going to keep it from pitching too far out. So we'll take the wing nut and the hardware. So split washer and flat washer. And that's going to feed through this bracket. So if you need to, you can slide this forward. If you need to dial this back, you just spin it. And I'm going to get my wing nut in place. We'll do our flat washer, our split washer, and then our wing nut. Get that kind of squared up. And then the knob that's by the foot, that's what you can use to rotate. So I'll draw it in by hand first. I'll make sure my bracket's tightened back properly first. And then from here, we're going to just dial this in. We want to make sure that it's going to, have pressure against it. Make sure it is perpendicular. You don't want it at an angle or anything like that. But really get it perfectly spot on here. And then I'm going to just tension this down by hand. And when adjusting, we're really going to be adjusting how far out it is, but also how level this is, because if you were to over tighten this, it's going to bow this to where it's not going to be level up top. So really trying to get a good eye on it, take a look at it from the side, make sure that it's all level. You can always adjust a little bit later on if it's not going out perfectly smooth, but try to get it as level as possible, and then we're just going to repeat the same step on the other side. Now we need to get our drain tubes in place, and what's going to happen is this will collect water, but there's a channel that it would drain out of, and that's what this hole is right here. So included in the kit is going to be this portion that slides on. So first I'll get this in place, and it should just slide right there, and there's a little stop there. You should feel it kind of pop into place, and it's got some threads here, so we'll just thread on our drain tube. And then you can choose to drill holes to run this, but you can actually use the holes that are right here, and this is going to run it down to the pocket and eventually out to the ground. So you might need an extra set of hands here to feed this down through. It's kind of a tight opening down there, but I was able to pull it through and get a nice clean run. So this is going to be imperative to make sure that long term we're not having water build up in our tonneau cover. And once fed down, I just fed it through this portion. And I'm going to zip tie it up to my wires just so it's not going to be dripping all over our connectors. It'll be going straight to the ground. but this is where you're going to have access to be able to run this down. Now grab your lubricating wipe, and we're going to grab this and just rub it along the inside seal. So there's a wear strip, and then we have this seal that's going to basically be where our tonneau cover runs. So we want to make sure that this is nice and smooth for protection of it, but also just smooth actuating. So run this along both sides. You can go pretty heavy on this. Just make sure it's coated nice and evenly. Now we're going to hook it up to power and make sure that it's all working properly. And you're going to find that there's actually 2 plugs from the canister. One's going to be labeled switch, and that's so you can get a Bluetooth box that's going to mount up to this. It's sold separately, but that way you can operate it from your phone. But this, we're just going to take our power that we ran previously at the first step and our other one from our canister and plug it in. And if you want to, you could take some electrical tape and wrap this up. It should stay pretty well protected under here. You can also zip tie that up out of the way. But we're going to go put our fuse in place. So grab your key fob and let's head up to the engine bay. We'll get that fuse in and we can test it. Cap this up. Now we'll just push close and see if it engages. I hear something moving, so that's a good sign. Now once you've operated it a few times, see if there's any spots where it's catching. And first you could take that wipe and make sure that it's lubricated properly, but it could also be it's just not properly aligned. So it's a good chance to figure out where that spot is, where it's catching, and adjust your brackets accordingly. But for now, we're going to open this back up. We can ooh and ah and watch it, but we're going to get the drain tubes for the canister mounted up. Our canister drain tubes are going to be pretty easy to install. You'll just reach under and there's going to be a hole that's pretty far up, and that's going to collect any water that builds up in the canister and drain it out just like we did in the back. Now you should have some factory spots to pop out. If you have bed liner on it, it might give you a little bit of a fight. If that's the case, you can just simply drill a hole that's large enough for this drain tube to go out, but they also include new ones that snap into place. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to worry about drilling anything. So what I'll do is get this in place. I'll just pop it in, make sure that it snaps in exactly how we want. And with that snapped in, we'll take the portion of our drain tube. It's got a foam washer. Just make sure that's on there. And there's going to be some snaps. So we'll just raise this up into place. It should pop into position. And this does rotate, so just push those to where the tabs go in. And they do have some flat sections along the bottom portion. And if you just rotate that, it should tighten up and it'll compress that foam, creating a nice seal. So now all I need to do, run my drain down. And then we'll just repeat on the other side. So with our drain tubes in place, really all that's left to do is clean up any of the zip ties or the wiring in the engine bay that you want to. I can zip tie up my wires on the side as well, but really it's pretty well installed, and so all that's left to do is really enjoy it. And that was a look and installation of the Pace Edwards UltraGroove powered sliding tonneau cover on a 2024 Ford F-450.